How did people feel about getting older when life was so much shorter? Did they dread the end or embrace it? What did the greatest minds of 1,000 years, from roughly 400 AD to 1450 AD, believe about human existence, the passing of time, and the final breath? Number 8. Augustine of Hippo. In the vast Roman Empire, as it began to shift and transform, a brilliant mind named Augustine of Hippo emerged. He was a bishop, a deep thinker, and a writer whose words would echo through centuries, shaping Christian thought for a long time. Born in the town of Thagestade in what is now Algeria, around the year 354 AD, Augustine lived through a period of immense change, witnessing the decline of Roman power and the rise of Christianity. His own life was a dramatic journey, moving from a youth filled with intellectual curiosity and worldly pursuits to a profound spiritual conversion. This personal transformation deeply colored his understanding of human nature, time, and destiny, including the unavoidable march of aging and the finality of death. Augustine's view on human existence was built upon a central idea. Humanity was created good by God, perfect and whole, but had fallen from that state. This event, known as original sin, had fundamental consequences for every aspect of human life. Before the fall, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden were envisioned as having bodies that were not subject to decay, sickness, or death. They existed in a state of grace, in complete harmony with God, their minds governing their bodies perfectly. But when they chose to disobey, that harmony shattered. The very fabric of their being, and by extension, the being of all their descendants, became flawed. This imperfection meant that the human body was now destined for decay, vulnerability, and ultimately, death. For Augustine, aging was a visible, undeniable sign of this fallen state. It was not a natural part of creation as God originally intended it, but rather a consequence of sin. The body, once immortal and vibrant, became subject to the relentless passage of time. Muscles weakened, senses dulled, and the youthful vigor faded into decrepitude. Augustine saw this process as a constant, sobering reminder of humanity's separation from its original perfect state. It was a physical manifestation of the spiritual ailment inherited through the fall. The body, though still a miraculous creation, was now a temporary vessel, prone to illness and programmed for an end. This decay, however, was not seen as inherently bad in itself, or as a punishment to be simply suffered. Instead, it served a profound spiritual purpose. The weakening of the body, the increasing frailty that comes with age, was meant to turn the human mind and soul away from earthly pleasures and transient comforts. When the body could no longer provide the same level of gratification or distraction, the soul was prompted to seek something higher, something eternal. Aging thus became a spiritual teacher, gently pushing individuals to detach from the fleeting concerns of this world and fix their gaze upon God, who was timeless and unchanging. The more the body withered, the more the soul was encouraged to flourish in spiritual contemplation and preparation for what lay beyond. Mortality. The ultimate end of earthly life was therefore not an annihilation, but a transition. For Augustine, death was the moment when the perishable body was finally separated from the immortal soul. The body returned to the dust from which it came. Its purpose served in this temporal realm. The soul, however, continued its journey. Its destiny after death was determined by its choices during life, leading either to eternal blessedness with God or to eternal punishment. The concept of death for Augustine was thus deeply interwoven with the idea of judgment and the afterlife. It was the gateway to a state of being that was permanent and unchangeable. Unlike the mutable existence on earth, Augustine's most famous works, Confessions and City of God, are rich with these ideas. In Confessions, a deeply personal account of his spiritual journey. Augustine reflects on the death of his beloved mother, Monica. He describes her passing not with despair, but with a sense of peace and hope, confident in her salvation and the ultimate reunion in the presence of God. This narrative provides a poignant example of his belief that death, while sorrowful for those left behind, was a release for the righteous soul into eternal life. Monica's example illustrates the Augustinian perspective on aging and death. A life lived in faith, marked by an understanding of earthly transience, prepares the soul for a joyous and purposeful transition. In City of God, Augustine contrasts two symbolic cities, the earthly city and the heavenly city. The earthly city, composed of those who live for worldly desires, is inherently transient, characterized by conflict, decay, and the inevitability of death. The heavenly city, on the other hand, is eternal, built upon divine love and righteousness, and represents the ultimate destination, for the faithful, aging, and mortality were central to this distinction. Life in the earthly city was bound by time and its limitations, including the aging process and the certainty of death. This contrast was not simply between two physical places, but two ways of living, two orientations of the heart. To live for the heavenly city was to live with an awareness of mortality, preparing for a death that was not an end, but a beginning. Augustine understood human life as a pilgrimage, a temporary journey through a foreign land. The earthly body, subject to the wear and tear of time, was the vessel for this journey. Aging was the visual evidence of the journey's progress, marking the traveler's increasing proximity to the ultimate destination. The discomforts and infirmities of old age served as a constant reminder that this world was not the true home, prompting the soul to look towards the eternal city where perfect bodies and perfect souls would finally reside, free from decay and death. This perspective offered a framework for understanding and accepting the physical changes of aging, viewing them not as a curse, but as a providential means of focusing the human spirit on its higher purpose and ultimate destiny. Number 7. Boethius. Anicius Manlius Severinus Boethius, often simply called Boethius, lived in a time of great upheaval for the Roman world. Born around 480 AD into a prominent aristocratic family, he served as a high-ranking official under Theodoric the Great, the Ostrogothic king who ruled Italy after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Boethius was a scholar, a statesman, and a Christian who dedicated himself to preserving Greek philosophy by translating works of Plato and Aristotle into Latin. His life, however, took a tragic turn. Accused of treason, he was imprisoned and later executed in 524 AD. It was during his imprisonment, facing certain death, that he wrote his most enduring work, The Consolation of Philosophy. This book is not a religious text in the traditional sense, though Boethius was a devout Christian. Instead, it is a dialogue between Boethius himself, as a prisoner distraught by his fate, and Lady Philosophy, who appears to him as a radiant, wise woman. The book explores questions of fortune, happiness, evil, and the nature of God. While it does not directly discuss aging in detail, the themes of human suffering, the transience of earthly goods, and the search for true happiness amid adversity are deeply relevant to how one might approach the physical and temporal limitations that aging and mortality bring. Boethius's personal situation as a prisoner awaiting execution made the question of mortality immediate and pressing. He had lost everything: his wealth, his status, his freedom, and soon his life. Lady Philosophy's primary goal was to guide him away from despair by showing him that true happiness does not lie in external circumstances, which are fickle and unreliable, but in internal wisdom and virtue. This idea directly addressed the common human experience of decline, including the decline of physical health and abilities that accompany aging. From Lady Philosophies' perspective, earthly fortunes, whether they be wealth, power, fame, or even physical beauty and strength, are inherently unstable. They are like a constantly turning wheel. What is up one moment is down the next. A person who places their happiness in these external things is constantly at the mercy of chance. Aging, with its unavoidable decline of physical capabilities and appearance, is a powerful example of this instability. The youthful body, once vibrant and strong, eventually weakens and becomes prone to illness. This process demonstrates that physical well-being is a temporary gift, not an eternal possession. A person who clings to the vigor of youth as their source of happiness is bound to suffer as it slips away. Lady Philosophy argues that genuine, lasting happiness comes from within, from understanding and aligning oneself with the eternal and unchanging good, which is God. This true good is immune to the whims of fortune. It cannot be taken away by imprisonment, poverty, sickness, or even death. Therefore, the physical changes of aging, or the ultimate end of life, are not threats to true happiness if one has cultivated an inner state of wisdom and virtue. The infirmities of age become less significant when one's focus is on spiritual and intellectual flourishing, which are independent of the body's condition. Mortality, for Boethius, was the ultimate manifestation of fortune's fickleness regarding earthly life. Death represents the absolute removal of all worldly possessions and experiences. Yet, Lady Philosophy presents it not as an ultimate defeat, but as a final step in separating oneself from the illusions of temporal happiness. If one has learned to find joy in the eternal good, then death, though a frightening prospect, becomes the gateway to a permanent state of union with that good. It is a release from the cycle of fortune's ups and downs. The consolation encourages its reader to seek a perspective that transcends the immediate reality of suffering and loss. It suggests that by understanding the nature of divine providence and the limitations of human knowledge, one can find peace even in the face of death. Boethius's dialogue illustrates how a rational approach to life's impermanence can lead to profound calm. The approach does not deny the pain of loss or the fear of death, but offers a path to transcend these feelings by focusing on what is truly valuable and enduring. The book often contrasts the temporal with the eternal. Aging belongs to the temporal realm, a process unfolding in time, affecting the mutable human body. But the soul, when focused on divine wisdom, can access a realm that is outside of time, a place where age and decay hold no sway. This perspective allowed Boethius, and by extension his readers, to find solace in contemplating the unchanging nature of truth and goodness, even as their own bodies and the world around them continued to age and change. Boethius's work was immensely popular throughout the Middle Ages, shaping the intellectual landscape for centuries. It taught generations of thinkers that adversity, including the physical decline that comes with age and the inevitability of death, could be faced not with despair, but with a philosophical resilience rooted in the pursuit of higher, unchanging truths. His message was not about extending life, but about living the life one has, however long or short, with an understanding that true peace lies beyond the reach of time and circumstance. His own dignified acceptance of his fate, as portrayed in his writing, provided a powerful testament to these philosophical principles, demonstrating how wisdom can console even in the face of death. Number 6. Hildegard of Bingen. Hildegard of Bingen, born in 1098 AD in what is now Germany, was an extraordinary figure of the High Middle Ages. She was a Benedictine abbess, a visionary, a composer, a poet, a philosopher, and a pioneering natural scientist and medical writer. Her influence extended far beyond the walls of her convent, reaching popes, emperors, and common people alike. Hildegard's understanding of the world, including aging and mortality, was deeply holistic, intertwining the spiritual, the physical, and the cosmic. She saw the human being as a microcosm, a small universe reflecting the larger macrocosm, and believed that everything was interconnected within God's creation. Kierkegaard's visions, which she recorded in works like Civia's Know the Ways, provided a spiritual framework for her understanding of life, death, and the human condition. She experienced these visions from a young age, describing them as the shade of the living light, which allowed her to perceive divine mysteries and the intricate workings of the universe. This unique spiritual insight informed her views on the human body, its vitality, its eventual decline, and the soul's journey. A central concept in Hildegard's medical and cosmological thought was viriditas, often translated as greenness or viridity. This was more than just a color. It represented the life force, the moistness, the vitality, and the healing power found throughout creation, from plants to human beings. When a person was in their prime, full of health and energy, they possessed abundant viriditas. It was a reflection of divine creativity and life within them. As a person aged, this viriditas naturally decreased. The body became drier, less supple, and more prone to disease. Hildegard understood aging as a gradual loss of this vital greenness, a natural progression from flourishing to withering, much like a plant that eventually loses its leaves and fruit. However, this decline was not solely negative. For Hildegard, the aging process, while marking a decrease in physical viriditas, could simultaneously usher in an increase in spiritual viriditas. As the outer person weakened, the inner person, the soul, had the opportunity to grow stronger in wisdom, faith, and closeness to God. The diminishing demands and distractions of a robust physical body could allow for deeper contemplation and spiritual development. She saw aging as a natural part of the human journey, a stage that could be lived with grace and purpose, not merely a period of decay to be dreaded. Her medical writings, Physica, Natural History, and Causae et Curae, Causes and Cures, detail specific ailments and their remedies, often linking physical health to spiritual well-being. She believed that imbalances in the humors, the four bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, whose balance was thought to determine health and temperament, contributed to both disease and the aging process. Through proper diet, herbal remedies, and a balanced lifestyle, one could strive to maintain health and even, to some extent, mitigate the harsher effects of aging. This practical approach demonstrated her belief that while aging was natural, humans could wisely interact with their environment to support their bodies, honoring them as vessels for the soul. Mortality for Hildegard was the ultimate transition. It was the moment when the soul, which she viewed as a spark of the divine, was released from its earthly vessel and returned to its divine source. Death was not an end, but a transformation, a shedding of the mortal coil that allowed the immortal spirit to continue its journey. Her visions often depicted the soul's ascent, its encounters with heavenly realms, and its ultimate destiny in the presence of God. This perspective imbued death with a sense of purpose and a profound spiritual significance. It was the completion of the earthly pilgrimage and the beginning of eternal life. Hildegard's holistic view meant that she saw preparation for death as an integral part of living well. A life lived in spiritual harmony, with attention to both the physical body and the immortal soul, was the best preparation. She believed that sins, particularly those that harmed the soul's purity, could also manifest as physical ailments, emphasizing the deep connection between moral conduct and bodily health. Dying well, therefore, was a culmination of living well, embracing the natural order of life and death as part of God's grand design. The monastic life which Hildegard led itself embraced the concept of memento mori, remembering death. This was not a morbid obsession, but a practice meant to encourage a mindful life, where every day was lived with an awareness of its finite nature and the eternal destiny that awaited. For Hildegard, the contemplation of mortality was a catalyst for spiritual growth, urging individuals to live virtuously and seek connection with the divine, thereby preparing their souls for the ultimate transition from the greenness of earthly life to the eternal light of God. Her work provides a unique and inspiring medieval perspective, bridging the physical and the spiritual realms in a profound understanding of the human lifespan. Number 5. Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas, born around 1225 AD near Naples, Italy, was one of the most towering intellectual figures of the High Middle Ages. A Dominican friar and a brilliant theologian, he embarked on a monumental task to synthesize the philosophy of Aristotle, a pagan Greek thinker, with Christian doctrine. His vast and systematic writings, particularly the Summa Theologica, profoundly influenced Western thought and remain a cornerstone of Catholic theology. Aquinas' rigorous approach to philosophy and theology provided a detailed framework for understanding human nature, including the processes of aging and the meaning of mortality. Aquinas' understanding of human nature began with the premise that a human being is a composite of body and soul. Unlike some earlier thinkers who might have viewed the body as a mere prison for the soul, Aquinas, following Aristotle, saw the body and soul as intimately united, forming a single substance. The soul is the form of the body, giving it life, shape, and its specific human capabilities. This union meant that the human person was an integrated whole, with both physical and spiritual dimensions being essential to existence. From this perspective, aging was seen as a natural process inherent in all material things. Just as everything in the natural world comes into being, grows, and then decays, so too does the human body. It is a process of generation and corruption, a term borrowed from Aristotle. The body is a material entity, subject to the laws of the physical world, which include change, wear, and eventual dissolution. Aquinas did not view aging primarily as a consequence of sin, as Augustine did, but rather as a natural part of being a finite, material creature in a temporal world. God, as the ultimate creator, designed a world where things have beginnings and ends, where processes unfold over time. Aging was simply a part of this divinely ordered natural process. The gradual weakening of the body, the diminishing of its powers and faculties with age, was therefore not seen as inherently punitive, but as a natural consequence of the body's material composition. The rational soul, though immortal and incorruptible, is intimately connected to the body. As the body ages, the soul's ability to operate through it, such as perceiving through weakened senses or moving with diminished strength, also naturally lessens. This did not mean the soul itself was aging or decaying, but rather that its instrument, the body, was losing its efficacy. Mortality, the ultimate cessation of bodily life, was thus understood as the natural separation of the soul from the body, because the soul is the form that animates the body. Its departure meant the body would no longer function as a living human being. For Aquinas, this separation was a natural end for the composite human being in this earthly existence. However, this did not mean the end of the human person. For Aquinas, the soul is immortal. When the body dies, the soul continues to exist, going to God for judgment. This soul, while separated from its body, retains its identity and its capacity for intellect and will. A unique aspect of Aquinas' view on mortality was his strong emphasis on the resurrection of the body. He believed that, at the end of time, the souls of the departed would be reunited with their glorified bodies. This was not just a spiritual reunion, but a physical one, emphasizing the importance of the body as an integral part of the human person. The resurrected body would be perfect, incorruptible, and immortal, no longer subject to aging, sickness, or death. This belief offered a profound hope that the temporary physical decay and death experienced in this life would ultimately be overcome, and the human composite of body and soul would be eternally restored to a perfected state. For Aquinas, death was the ultimate gateway. It marked the end of an individual's earthly probation, the period during which one's choices and actions determined one's eternal destiny. After death, the soul entered a state of judgment leading to eternal blessedness in heaven, temporary purification in purgatory, or eternal separation in hell. The contemplation of mortality was therefore a powerful motivator for living a virtuous life, as every action had eternal consequences. In his Summa Theologica, Aquinas discusses the human body, the soul, and their relationship in meticulous detail. He addresses questions about the soul's incorruptibility, the nature of death, and the conditions of the resurrected body. His arguments are built on logical reasoning and theological principles, presenting a coherent and systematic understanding of the human journey from conception to eternal life. Aging was a step in this journey, a natural process of the body moving towards its natural end, preparing the soul for its transition to the next eternal phase of existence. His philosophy provided a robust intellectual framework for understanding the inevitability of physical decline and death, embedding it within a larger, divinely ordered cosmos, leading towards a hopeful and perfected future. Number 4. Roger Bacon. Roger Bacon, born around 1214 AD in Somerset, England, was a Franciscan friar and an intellectual of the High Middle Ages who stood out for his insistence on observation, experimentation, and mathematics as pathways to knowledge. While he was deeply religious and worked within the framework of medieval Christian thought, his emphasis on empirical inquiry earned him the nickname Dr. Mirabilis, wonderful teacher, and set him apart from many of his scholastic contemporaries. Bacon was less concerned with abstract philosophical arguments about the nature of aging and mortality, and more interested in the practicalities of how humans could understand and perhaps even mitigate the effects of time on the body. Bacon believed that true knowledge was not just about studying ancient texts, but about directly observing the natural world and conducting experiments. This empirical approach extended to his views on human health and longevity. He saw aging as a natural process of decay, a gradual diminishment of the body's powers, but he also believed that human ingenuity, guided by sound knowledge and proper practices, could work within God's natural laws to preserve health and prolong life. This was not about defying divine will, but about better understanding the intricate workings of creation and using that understanding for human benefit. In his major work, the Opus Majus, Greater Work, Bacon dedicated sections to the study of medicine and natural philosophy, including discussions on the causes of old age and the means to preserve health. He drew upon existing medical knowledge, including Arabic and Greek texts, but he also advocated for direct observation and systematic investigation. Bacon believed that old age was caused by the drying out and cooling of the body, a process that could be accelerated by poor diet, inadequate hygiene, and an unhealthy lifestyle. He also touched upon the idea of environmental factors contributing to physical decline. Bacon proposed various methods for prolonging life and maintaining vigor, which often included advice on diet, exercise, bathing, and even the benefits of pure air and water. He was interested in what we might today call early gerontology, though always within the bounds of his medieval context. His suggestions were not aimed at achieving immortality, which he knew was impossible in this earthly life, but at extending the period of useful, healthy living. He aimed to help people reach their natural maximum lifespan and live those years with as much vitality as possible. For instance, he suggested that the health of the young could be preserved by avoiding excesses, and that the old could maintain their health by consuming certain foods and concoctions. His fascination with the physical world and his belief in the power of observation also led him to explore what some might consider proto-scientific and even alchemical ideas, regarding life extension, such as searching for elixirs or universal medicines. However, these pursuits were always framed within the belief that God had endowed nature with secrets that, if properly understood and applied, could alleviate suffering and improve the human condition. He saw the potential for human reason and diligent study to unlock these natural secrets, including those related to the body's aging process. Mortality, for Roger Bacon, remained an inevitable fate. Despite his interest in preserving health and prolonging life, he recognized that death was the ultimate destiny of all material beings. His scientific inquiries were not intended to abolish death, but to deepen human understanding of God's creation and to alleviate the burdens of disease and premature aging. The human body, however long it lasted, was still temporary. Bacon's unique contribution was his emphasis on the empirical. He urged scholars to move beyond mere contemplation of texts and to engage directly with the world. This practical observational approach meant that while aging was seen as a natural process, it was also one that could be studied, understood, and even managed through careful human effort. The inevitability of death underscored the importance of making the most of one's earthly life, using reason and observation to navigate its challenges, including the physical decline that comes with age. His vision was a blend of spiritual devotion and practical inquiry, where knowledge of the natural world served both human well-being and the greater glory of the Creator. He believed that a deeper understanding of the body's processes, including aging, was a form of worship, revealing the intricate design of God's universe. Number 3. Duns Scotus. John Duns Scotus, born around 1266 AD in Scotland, was a brilliant Franciscan friar and philosopher-theologian who profoundly influenced late medieval thought. Often called the subtle doctor due to his incredibly precise and intricate arguments, Scotus offered a distinctive perspective that sometimes diverged from the dominant Thomistic school. His ideas emphasized the primacy of God's will and the contingency of creation, meaning that things could have been otherwise than they are. This voluntaristic approach had significant implications for understanding human nature, including the process of aging and the finality of mortality. For Scotus, the universe is not necessarily a perfectly ordered, fixed system of natural laws that unfold mechanistically. Instead, it is a testament to God's immense freedom and absolute will. God could have created the world in countless other ways, and the way it exists is due to his free choice. This emphasis on divine freedom meant that aging, while observed as a natural process, was ultimately dependent on God's contingent will for each individual. It was not merely an inevitable consequence of material existence following fixed laws, but rather a particular sequence of events that God, in his freedom, ordained for a specific individual's life. Scotus's concept of haecidi, Latin for thisness, is crucial here. Haecidi refers to the singular, unrepeatable thisness of an individual thing or person. Every human being possesses a unique haecki that makes them distinct and unrepeatable. This distinctness extends to their life journey, including their particular experience of aging. While there might be general patterns of physical decline, each person's aging process, its speed, its manifestations, and its ultimate outcome is part of their unique, divinely willed existence. It is not just a generic process, but a particular individual unfolding. This focus on contingency also extended to mortality. For Scotus, death was not simply the unavoidable consequence of natural biological laws that govern all material beings. While natural processes do occur, death was ultimately an act of divine will, freely chosen by God for each individual. God, in his absolute power, could sustain a life indefinitely. But in his ordained power, he wills the cessation of life at a specific time for specific individuals. This did not remove human responsibility or natural causes, but it underscored the ultimate sovereignty of God over life and death. The timing and manner of death were therefore seen as contingent on God's free will rather than being solely a product of fixed natural necessity. Scotus also emphasized the primacy of the will over the intellect, both in God and in humans. For humans, this meant that the will is fundamentally free, even in the face of death. One's response to aging and mortality is not predetermined. Individuals have the freedom to accept, resist, or find meaning in these processes through their own choices and spiritual orientation. This freedom of the will was paramount for Scotus. Even as the body ages and approaches its end, the will remains free to choose to love God, to pursue virtue, and to prepare for the ultimate transition. The concept of divine omnipotence and contingency meant that one could not fully grasp the reasons for a particular person's suffering or the timing of their death through human reason alone. These were ultimately rooted in God's inscrutable free will. This perspective could lead to a posture of humble acceptance towards the mysteries of life and death, including the seemingly arbitrary nature of some aspects of aging or the timing of a sudden death. It encouraged faith in God's ultimate plan, even when the specifics remained unclear to human minds. Scotus's thought provided a different lens through which to view life's finitude. It moved away from a purely mechanistic or deterministic understanding of nature and reasserted the central role of God's free and loving will in every aspect of creation, including the individual journey through time, marked by aging and culminating in mortality. His nuanced arguments helped to shape later philosophical discussions about freedom, contingency, and the nature of existence, encouraging a view of human life and its end as unique, individual experiences within the broader context of God's ultimate design. The singular thisness of each person's life, encompassing their specific journey through age and into death, was affirmed as a unique expression of God's creative will. Number 2. William of Ockham. William of Ockham, born around 1287 AD in Ockham, Surrey, England, was another influential Franciscan friar and scholastic philosopher from the late Middle Ages. He is perhaps best known for the principle often called Occam's razor, which states that plurality should not be posited without necessity, or simply, the simplest explanation is usually the best. Occam's philosophical approach, known as nominalism, had profound implications for how he understood reality, knowledge, and therefore human life, aging, and mortality. Occam's nominalism argued that universal concepts, like humanity or greenness, do not exist as real entities outside the mind. Only individual concrete things truly exist. There are no universal forms or essences that make a particular person human in some abstract sense. There are only individual humans. This rejection of universals meant that Occam focused intently on the particularity of experience. For Occam, therefore, aging was not primarily the manifestation of some universal process of decay that all humans participate in. Instead, it was a sequence of particular observable changes happening to a specific individual. When a person ages, their body undergoes concrete, observable transformations. Wrinkles appear, hair grays, strength diminishes. These are specific events and modifications happening to a specific individual, not the unfolding of a pre-existing universal pattern. Each person's aging journey is unique, a particular set of changes that occur to their distinct thisness. This emphasis on the particular meant that aging was deeply personal, an individual experience rather than a generic one. His philosophy also stressed the absolute omnipotence of God. For Occam, God is not bound by the natural laws that he himself created. God can directly cause any effect without needing intermediate causes. This strong emphasis on divine power had significant implications for understanding mortality. While one might observe a natural process of bodily decay leading to death, Occam would argue that God is ultimately the direct cause of every death. God can cause death at any moment, regardless of natural causes or an individual's health. He is not limited by the normal course of events. This perspective meant that death was not merely the culmination of a natural process, but an event directly willed by God for each individual. It underscored the profound unpredictability of life. While people might grow old, there was no guarantee of a long life. God could choose to end a life at any point. This view could foster a profound sense of dependence on God's will and a humility before the divine. It encouraged a life of constant readiness, as the moment of one's death was ultimately known only to God. Occam's nominalism also emphasized human freedom and the limitations of human knowledge, especially concerning future contingent events. Because God's will is absolutely free and not bound by natural necessities, humans cannot truly know what God will do in the future, including when or how he will cause someone's death. This uncertainty about the future, about when one's own life might end, was a key aspect of Occam's thought. It was a challenge to intellectual certainty, urging individuals to rely more on faith and direct divine revelation rather than on philosophical speculation about universal laws. The implications for how one should live were clear. Live virtuously and obediently to God's commands, because the moment of reckoning is uncertain and depends entirely on God's free choice. While he acknowledged that the body naturally weakens and approaches its end, the timing of that end was always understood to be an act of God's direct free will. For Occam, the focus was not on the universal essence of aging or death, but on the concrete, particular reality of an individual's finite life and their ultimate encounter with God's omnipotence. His approach highlighted the uniqueness of each person's journey through time, marked by specific changes and culminating in a death that was ultimately an expression of divine will. Number 1. Christine de Pizan. Christine de Pizan, born around 1364 AD in Venice, Italy, but raised and working primarily in France, was a truly remarkable figure of the late Middle Ages. She was a professional writer, a scholar, and a moralist, a rare position for a woman in her time. After the death of her husband and father left her in financial hardship, she turned to writing to support her family, producing a wide range of works, including poetry, history, and treatises on governance and morality. Her most famous works, such as the Book of the City of Ladies and the Book of the Three Virtues, also known as Treasury of the City of Ladies, offer a distinctly practical, social, and often gendered perspective on human life, including the realities of aging and mortality. Unlike the male philosophers who often focused on abstract theological or metaphysical debates, Christine de Pizan's approach was grounded in the lived experience of ordinary people, particularly women. She wrote about the challenges and dignities of different stages of life from childhood to old age, and how individuals could navigate these stages virtuously. For Christine, aging was a natural and inevitable part of the human journey, bringing with it both physical decline and the potential for wisdom and respect. She did not delve into the philosophical causes of aging as a cosmic phenomenon, but rather observed its practical effects on individuals and society. For women, aging often meant a significant shift in social roles. A young woman might be valued for her beauty and potential for marriage and childbearing. As she aged, she transitioned to a different status: a wife, a mother, and eventually, perhaps a widow or a matriarch. Christine highlighted how older women could gain respect and authority through their accumulated experience and wisdom. They became keepers of knowledge, advisors, and figures of moral guidance within their families and communities. Christine emphasized the importance of living a virtuous life throughout one's youth and middle age as a preparation for a dignified old age. She believed that a person who lived with integrity, practiced self-control and cultivated wisdom would find old age to be a period of peace and reverence, rather than a time of regret or despair. The physical frailties of old age were acknowledged, but they were offset by the potential for spiritual growth and the honor derived from a well-lived life. In the Book of the Three Virtues, she offered practical advice to women of different social classes on how to manage their households, educate their children, and behave honorably, implicitly preparing them for all stages of life, including its later years. Mortality, for Christine, was an inescapable truth, a certainty that underscored the importance of living justly and preparing one's soul for the afterlife. She was deeply Christian and believed in heaven, purgatory, and hell, viewing death as the doorway to eternal judgment. Her writings often contained moral exhortations, reminding readers of the fleeting nature of earthly life and the permanence of spiritual destiny. This was not a morbid preoccupation, but a practical motivation for ethical living. The thought of death served as a powerful incentive to live a life worthy of salvation. She also touched upon the practical aspects of death, such as making arrangements for one's affairs and ensuring one's family was provided for. For Christine, preparing for death involved both spiritual readiness and a sense of practical responsibility to one's loved ones and one's legacy. Her focus was on human agency within the divinely ordained lifespan. While death was certain, how one approached it through their actions and character during life was a matter of choice. Christine de Pisan's writings provide a unique window into late medieval life, showing how the realities of aging and death were understood and navigated by people, particularly women, in their daily lives. Her work suggests that wisdom, moral rectitude, and the respect gained from a virtuous life were crucial assets in confronting the challenges of old age and the ultimate transition of death. She demonstrated that intellectual thought about these profound topics was not confined to monastic cells or university lecture halls, but extended into the practical concerns of family, society, and personal conduct, reflecting a humanistic concern for the human condition as it unfolded through time